to the Jerusalem Connection Red Alert Report. I am here today, your host, Amy Zaby, with our president, Shelley Neese. We love to have Shelley on our podcast every once in a while to get the latest scoop, and we have a new initiative starting that Shelley is going to convey to us because it is near and dear to her heart, and therefore it is near and dear to all of our hearts at the Jerusalem Connection. Shelley, welcome. You've had a very busy summer. We're happy to see you, and tell us what's been going on.
Hey, Amy. I was in Israel this summer wearing my other hat, which is just being a biblical archaeology student. And I had the opportunity to dig at Shiloh for 2 weeks. We say Shiloh when we're in the US and Shiloh when we're in Israel. So sometimes you'll hear.
Honestly, thank you for clarifying that because I never know how to say it.
Right. So it depends on the audience. So we'll say Shiloh because this is for an American audience. But it was an incredible couple of weeks. But during that time, I mean, we went from just dry sifting, wet sifting, and excavating our square to, I believe it was about 8 days in when the war with Iran broke out. And so suddenly we found ourselves in a position that we were still going to the excavation site every day and still digging for a few days, even though, I mean, the country was basically shut down. Israel didn't want any large gatherings. And, even the old city walls were shut as if it was like, the medieval period or something. Hardly any traffic on the streets. Just basically it was almost like we called it COVID with missiles. Like it was almost those same type rules, just no large gatherings, use common sense, try to avoid any potential dangers. And so it was a really strange time. Mostly it was also, essential businesses that were open, nothing extra. So we just kept digging for the first few days because there's really not a whole lot else to do. But it did start to get hard because we were waking up throughout the night, getting alarm sounds on our phones and having to go to the bomb shelter or just having to pray in place in our beds. And so it got harder. So on about day 5 of the war, we are at Shiloh and we're digging, and all alarms go off on our cell phones, which is always the signal that there are about to be missiles overhead. And we had no bomb shelter. We had nowhere to go. We had like a storage shed. And so some of us, just in the need to feel like we were being responsible, went in the storage shed. Other people, like our head archaeologist, Scott Stripling, or, the one who's in charge of the whole Shiloh dig, he just kept sifting pottery and organizing while it was all happening. But that did signal at the end. And we were already aware that it was our last day, but that definitely confirmed that.
And it's interesting because we're talking about this now in retrospect, and we call it the 12-day war because it was 12 days. But at that point in time, what were you, 5 days in, you just said you had no idea that this war was going to be over in 7 more days. It could have gone on for years, and nobody knew what kind of casualties were going to incur. Thankfully, it was far less than anybody ever predicted. But still, you're in a position like you don't know what the next 7 days are going to hold, let alone beyond that. So
absolutely. I mean, the Gaza war was going on. So the Gaza war was entering, almost, closing out its second year. So that was also in the back of my head. Is this another Gaza war? Is this like a war that we won't see the end of for a very long time? It certainly, even by day 5, was becoming evident that maybe Iran was a bit of a paper tiger because they certainly weren't having the same kind of impact that people had predicted in the decades that we've been thinking that this war could be a possibility one day. And then, of course, we were in Egypt on our escape route. We ended up having to leave through Egypt because there was no way to leave the country through Israel. You either had to go through Jordan or through Egypt. So we chose the Egypt option. And it was at breakfast one morning in Egypt that we learned America had also done their part to close out the war.
So now the dig was called. Y'all had to sort out a way to escape, and going through Jordan probably wasn't everybody's first choice. But the bus trip through the Sinai was probably long and hot and harried. But in between all that, something happened where there was a penetration into Israel that was pretty profound. Thank God there was no casualties as a result, but it was definitely something that shook the south of Israel. And tell us about that. Tell us what happened while you were there and how you discovered it and what it meant to you.
So after we shut down the dig, all of us just started working on our papers. We all had research papers and to write. So that was kind of how I was spending my days. Hotels were pretty much the only thing open or the only thing that we could be at. And so one morning while I was starting to work on the research paper, we heard the missiles that got the sirens, saw the interceptions overhead, and then I went to check the news, which is what I always did anytime. It's like this whole sequence of events. Your phone alarm goes off, you go to shelter, you get some kind of notification of where the bombings were happening. But in this case, it wasn't the news. Like I suddenly started getting a lot of messages on WhatsApp, and it was pictures of Soroka Hospital that was just very familiar territory to my husband and myself, that was just in shambles. So I wasn't even seeing headlines yet. I was just seeing videos of Soroka Hospital that it had received a direct hit. And Soroka Hospital is, so my husband and I both lived in Beersheba, Israel for 3.5 years, from 2000 to 2004. And that was during the second Intifada, but we were also just young, poor college students. And so we didn't have air conditioning in our apartment. And we spent our days pretty much at Soroka Hospital on that whole campus, in the library, in the cafeteria, in the classrooms. I was a student at Ben Gurion University, which is just right across the street. So Soroka Hospital and Ben Gurion University, I mean, you just cross the street to get back and forth from one to the other. So I just knew those grounds so well. I mean, and it was just something about seeing those images. One, I mean, I knew it was a hospital that had over 1,000 beds and it was always pretty much at capacity because it serves all of Israel's south. And so I couldn't imagine a scenario that there weren't casualties. Patients aren't so easy to move in the case of an emergency. And so I just cried in bed for half a day. I mean, just waiting for news to come out, just waiting for the horror stories that I predicted would be coming. But it became clear right away that between God's protective hand and very good leadership at the hospital, that there was no casualties, because the day before, the vulnerable section of the hospital, they had evacuated and were kind of had gone back to COVID rules of just only doing procedures that were essential, no elective things. And so they were already a lower patient population. And then the surgery and the inpatient areas that were necessary, they had moved to the bomb shelter, including OB. Even all of the pregnant and laboring women were protected. There was a woman who gave birth while in the bomb shelter, while everything was crazy up above. And there was no loss of life. It was also 100% compliance with the staff and everyone else that had been above ground during that time, that when they heard the sirens, that they all went to safety. So there was no lives lost, which is amazing. But it does leave a huge hole in the medical system in Israel. Soroka Hospital is the place that brings in, that treats all of Israel's south. And so that is all of the Bedouin and the Negev Desert. That's all of the IDF soldiers that are wounded in the war in Gaza. The next closest hospital would be in Ashkelon. So even just a helicopter ride for a soldier out of Gaza means a longer, evacuation process. A Bedouin who is in labor has to go an hour and a half to 2 hours further to have a baby. So you can't have this hole in their medical system. And the missile hit the heart of the hospital. Almost every part of the hospital was impacted in some way. Israel is taking care of, part of the rebuild process, but as you know, it hasn't been an easy 2 years for Israel. So it's there's only so much they can do and so much they can do quickly. So
Right.
Soroka and Ben Gurion University are really relying on outside help to get things moving quicker.
And specifically, because your husband, who is a physician, and y'all didn't just hang out in Soroka Hospital, he actually did a lot of his learning there and his
Mm-hmm.
practical clinical work. So it has a near and dear place in your hearts for a variety of reasons. Just you can just picture the halls, you can picture the people, you can picture the people it serves, the staff. I'm sure in the 20 years, some of the same staff is still there because people, this is their home and this is their careers. So what is our initiative here at the Jerusalem Connection is to provide a tangible helping hand to Soroka. Tell us a little bit about what we're working on and how we can help.
So I really wanted, I mean, I knew when I was in Israel and just this, the fog hadn't even lifted from the war, and certainly the smoke hadn't gone away from the Soroka hallways. But I just knew that when I got back from Israel that we would have to do something. And it was very clear to me that it had to be something involving Soroka. And by the way, I mean, Iran hit a hospital. Like, so
Right.
also just there was a certain amount of righteous anger in all of
Yeah.
this that happened too. They claimed all of this nonsense stuff that Israel had tanks underground, and they, it was actually they were aiming at the IDF military unit that was miles away. There's no way that their precision was that off. And so there's a lot of righteous anger that I felt in the beginning too. But I knew that just I wanted to reach out to Christians to fill this void. And so rebuilding a hospital is, a $70 million project. And so how can we do more than just be a drop in the bucket of the need? And as it turns out, the medical school, the classroom, so where my husband spent most of his days learning how to treat people and heal people from amazing doctors and physicians, they were all destroyed. So that they took direct impact. And the school semester starts after the high holidays in Israel, so that's really coming up. And they'll be, I mean, it's almost like a hurricane. They'll be in temporary shelters until they can have a permanent classroom situation. So we have talked to American Friends of Ben Gurion University, and what they're planning on doing is moving the medical school over to be part of Ben Gurion University's campus. And so I would like to reach out to Christians to be a part of that, to be a part of helping the healing hands that will be treating Israel's sick and wounded, that will be helping soldiers in Gaza restore vision and limbs, and having a classroom and a research facility to do that is essential. And so I just felt like that was the best way. It's a message that isn't really reaching anyone in America quite yet, because the need is just so great in Israel that people are having a hard time knowing where to
Distilling
even begin.
the specifics about what we can do to help. So the medical school lost its classroom and research facilities. Our initiative is to contribute specifically towards those teaching facilities, because in order to have great doctors to care for the population, they have to be taught. And so our initiative is to really be a tangible asset for the rebuilding of the medical teaching facilities. And this has a direct contribution towards the personnel that will continue to care for the population, including injured soldiers in Gaza and the population that just simply resides in the region. And this is near and dear to your heart because you and your husband, or actually, well, your husband was a participant in that program, and it's a way to turn around and aid that. And I can't think of anything more appropriate. We will share in the show notes exactly how you all listening and seeing this interview can make that contribution. And also keep in mind that there is a doctor shortage in Israel. So the more, with the loss of teaching facilities, this compounds the pain in that shortage of medical personnel. So hopefully our contributions to these medical teaching facilities will also aid in that lessening that shortage or opening that bottleneck of shortage of doctors who can serve in Israel. Shelley, I am sorry you had to endure that pain of hearing the news about that destruction, but in the same way, because you feel that pain and you have that direct connectedness, we can turn around and feel just as connected to help in that rebuilding. And there's 1,001 ways or more to contribute to Israel's safety and security and rebuilding. And this is one way that we can put our full focus and heart into helping and to comfort the people of Israel and pray for their peace as well.
Exactly.
Thank you again for your time, Shelley. And again, check your show notes, everybody, to see the direct links for how you contribute and help this cause. And we will be following up and give you updates on that progress. Shavua Tov, and have a great week. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai.